Therapists, what story shook you the most? Story 1. I once had a man who was attending family therapy with his 3 children admit that his last child, a girl, was an accident we tried to abort. We only wanted boys. The sad thing is, the girl didn't even look bothered. She had clearly heard it all before. They were attending family therapy as the girl was actively suicidal and they didn't know why. Reply 1. I knew a family kinda like this. Huge family, more than 5 kids, all girls except the youngest. Parents basically worshipped the ground boy child walked on, set no limits for him and his behavior, forced his sisters to basically act as his servants. I once saw him chasing around a sister with a pair of scissors because he wanted to play haircut, and the parents made the sister stop and let him cut her hair. You might be shocked to learn he was expelled from school for assaulting a classmate, and his parents insisted he had done nothing wrong. He works in finance now. Reply 2. I had a high school teacher with a similar but opposite scenario. He only wanted girls since his entire family going back a few generations only had boys. He had 8 kids, all girls but the last one. It was a boy. He refused to even acknowledge his existence, called him it, and that thing over there was very vocal about his disappointment this kid ruined his all-girl streak, and about how much he never wanted a son. It was so bad his wife filed for divorce after she was well enough postpartum to handle things by herself. Never mind that his wife was his high school student when he got with her initially. She was 17 to his 29, so he wasn't a bastion of feminism either. Yes, he never got fired. This would have happened in the early 80s and they didn't care back then. Reply 3. Kinda sounds like my family, except that they didn't straight out say it to me. But it was obvious from the way they treated me opposed to all of my brothers. I guess it didn't help that I am also neurodivergent, severe ADHD without hyperaction and likely autism. But they never even thought of getting me tested, and I'm just a dumb girl. Had a lot of self-destructive behavior in my teens, only got to go see a therapist from age 11 because the school nurse got worried, and my school contacted them a few times saying that I need therapy. Fast forward, I'm soon turning 32. Never been able to hold a job, been self-destructive most of my life, including multiple different ways of self-harming, no degrees, but trying to apply to a school for people with disabilities to get one. No actual relationship to my family. Brothers are always questioning why I don't like my parents or them anymore. People in the family act like I'm the bad guy in all of this. This is why I hate boy moms and boy dads with passion, because mine are that. Story 2. I worked with a teenager who was struggling with eating disorders to the point she'd been hospitalized for organ damage at one point a few months before. I went to dinner with the girl and her mother. Her mom spent the entire dinner counting the individual pieces of rice she, the mom, was eating so she could accurately count the calories she consumed. I asked the mom to stop and she just stared at me and asked why she would do that because she had to watch her figure. I wonder where the 15-year-old got her eating disorder from. For those of you wondering why I was eating with the kid and the mom, the teen was impatient and the mom was visiting. I was working as a psych tech and the kid wasn't allowed to eat unobserved, since I had to document her food intake to make sure she was eating sufficiently as a part of her treatment plan, so I joined her and her mom in the cafeteria for the meal. I definitely passed along the info about the mom's eating habits for the therapist to follow up with in family therapy. Reply 1. I went to high school with a girl whose mother was insufferable and would make lazy and fat comments to her 5'11", 100 lb daughter all the time. At the end of freshman year, we took a French club trip, and I roomed with her and another girl. We couldn't use our bathroom because the entire trip when we were in our room, she was in the bathroom. She used X-Lax to purge everything out of her. Our room was essentially uninhabitable due to the smell and lack of access to the restroom. She was hospitalized the following year, and we visited her and brought her flowers and begged the nurses to find her help and to distance her from her mother. We eventually lost touch by the end of high school. We just drifted apart, but I still cared about her. A few years later, she transferred into the same university I was attending. It was our junior year, and in May, all the dorms were cleared of students, and the RAs would check all the rooms. She was eventually found deceased in her room after a cardiac arrest due to her organs failing because of her eating disorder. Her funeral was packed and terribly sad. I glared at the mother the entire time and everyone knew, but did nothing. Story 3. A lovely teen girl was brought to her first appointment with me by her dad. Her mom had, as diplomatically as he could spell it out to me, recently up and left the family to go live some selfish new age lifestyle with a Reiki healer. Just abandoned him with 2 kids to raise solo, and he was doing his best for them. Therapy was the daughter's idea. She had been having troubling intrusive thoughts lately about school shootings, like how to plan and execute one, and these thoughts were upsetting to her, and she did not want to act on them. I can still picture how scared and sad she looked, telling me this. I just wanted to wrap her in my arms, but instead I offered so much praise and encouragement for her seeking help and trusting me with this information. She also met most of the diagnostic criteria for onset of a schizoaffective disorder. We pulled Dad into session, caught him up, explained the most urgent part of the plan. He was going to take her for a full eval with a great psychiatrist colleague of mine who understood the situation and was going to get her in stat. Daughter seemed relieved, Dad seemed relieved. We scheduled time to talk soon. Well, Mom woke up from whatever festival ditch she had passed out in to angrily call my office and flip out on me. How dare I? Am I trying to poison her child with pharmaceuticals? Did I even draw her blood and check her vitamin levels? Do I want a bad Google review, or worse yet, a warrant issued for my arrest? Do I even understand herbal supplements? I need to stop now because my head hurts remembering all of this. Reply 1. Schizoaffective is one of the absolute last mental health disorders you want to mess around, trying to treat with anything other than real medication. One of my dearest friends has it, and her meds are 1000% life-saving. I wish these creeps could be forced to experience the disorders they're dismissing, because psychotic disorders are some of the most draining and terrifying things that can be wrong with the human brain. The fact that we have medication to make life livable for people who suffer from these conditions is nothing short of a miracle. Reply 2. My best friend recently went through a divorce because his wife, who has mental health issues that she was taking meds for, went off the deep end. It all started when she went to a Reiki health retreat, where the leader bent a spoon, railed against modern medicine, and then tried to sell everyone a bunch of woo-woo supplements. She immediately stopped taking her meds, became aggressively against modern medicine, eventually started self-medicating with alcohol and possibly drugs, mentally and emotionally abusing the kids, and all kinds of other scary stuff. It was terrifying to see how quickly she went from happy and healthy mom to visibly not okay mess of a person who is violent and intoxicated, all because of some craphead scam artist. Reply 3. There is a woman I let go because I feared this exact outcome, that she'd up and abandon me and our future children one day because of some sudden revelation. It felt like a ticking time bomb that might go off whenever. She justified every whim with new age dogmas. It was all to cope with her inability to manage or even accept her mental condition. I loved her, and I sympathize with her. It must be terribly difficult to live with a mind that betrays you. But I just couldn't sign up for a life like that. Reading this brought me even more peace with my decision. Story 4. I had a woman once bring in her child for scholastic issues. The child clearly had fetal alcohol syndrome. I asked her gently if she consumed alcohol while pregnant, which she confirmed. When I told her that is likely the cause of the scholastic issues, she said, "I don't feel bad about it." The syndrome in general gives me a case of the WTFs. Reply 1. I have a cousin in his 60s who has had struggles his entire life, always seems slow, and has been an alcoholic for the last 40 years. My mother, a retired school teacher, was musing about his poor literacy and lifelong social issues when I suggested to her that perhaps he has FAS. It blew her mind, but admitted that it wasn't impossible as her sister struggled with alcohol abuse in the 60s and 70s. Reply 2. I was TAing for a biology professor when I was in grad school. It was a human biology course for nursing students. The lecture was everyone in the course, and then we would teach the other 2 days. So I sat in on the lectures to take notes on what was taught and take attendance for my section. We were in the fetal development portion of the course, and the professor was going through developmental problems in human fetuses. He discussed FAS and was going over the physical traits of FAS. He then looks around the class and says, "It looks like several of your mothers consumed alcohol during pregnancy." This was his area of research when he was early in his career. Lots of uncomfortable laughs and then everyone looking around. I later was talking to him and asked if he thought it was appropriate. He basically said it's one of the most common problems in society that we don't talk about, and we need to do more. He went on to say that he thinks a lot of issues we have in society are likely caused by alcohol consumption while pregnant. Reply 3. I know someone who smoked through the whole pregnancy. Of course, the kid is now severely disabled and can't do anything on his own. Lying around the whole day, drooling around, he even cannot swallow by himself. And I don't know why, but everyone in the household says it's not related to that. This has nothing to do with this. This illness is very rare, and only a few people have this in this country. Well, nah man, of course not. It's not like that the chances for something like that are much higher if you keep smoking. Now they are stuck with a kid which needs intensive care 24/7 just because the mother thought, "Screw it, I'm still doing it." I can tell you that story won't get a happy ending. That little fella is already over his life expectancy. Story 5. When I was an intern in my MSW program, I had a 19-year-old client tell me she was pregnant, didn't know who the dad was but had narrowed it down to 3 guys, was not going to stop smoking meth, and had no intention of attending her OBGYN appointments. However, she was going to keep the baby to let her mom raise it like she did with her other children. Reply 1. My cousin is deep in addiction, and she has done the same thing with her kids. She had her first at 19 and is 23 now. It is deeply heartbreaking and unsettling since her mom was also a teen mom who did the same thing. Do you have any advice on how I can understand better? As frustrating as it can honestly be on the outside. She is in rehab now, but I always felt bad for her and her kids. I didn't grow up close to her since my mom didn't want me to follow the same path. Reply 2. I worked as a pediatric PT in a disadvantaged area a long time ago. Had a woman come in with her 9th child. Luckily, the kid had a common infant muscle issue that was unrelated to abuse. And apparently it wasn't her first time bringing a child to the clinic. All 8 of her previous children had been taken from her and placed in foster care for various reasons, primarily abuse and neglect due to her severe drug issues and apathy. Apparently before I worked there, a therapist boldly asked her, "When are you going to stop having kids?" And she said, "I'll keep having kids until they let me keep one." Like a good Lord in heaven, those poor, poor children. I know forced sterilization should never be the answer, but this woman truly had no business continuing to have children, knowing they'd be taken from her due to her own inability to care for them. It was baffling. Reply 3. This reminds me of the time before I was a therapist, and I worked as a substitute teacher for a year between undergrad and grad school. I taught freshman algebra. I had a freshman pregnant with her 3rd child, and she casually joked one day, "I don't care what my mama says, the next one is an abortion." Admittedly, she was an older freshman, so 16 if I remember correctly, but that's still giving birth every year since she was 14, the legal age of consent in my state if the other person is also a minor. Apparently her mom didn't believe in letting her get on birth control because it would send the message that the mom condones stuff before marriage. Head desk. Yes, this was in the Great Southern Bible Belt. Reply 4. My adoptive brother was a child in a similar situation. His young mother was an addict who did everything. She claimed her birth control stopped working every time she was doing a lot of heroin. She put 3 guys down for paternity tests, none were the father. She claims she still doesn't know who it is. Same thing for the other 2 kids she has. So that's 3 months of her life she had unprotected stuff. With a minimum of 5 men, probably more. My brother was her oldest. He had 14 broken bones at 6 months old, including a broken skull and a brain bleed. He's severely autistic. He survived the abuse, so the mother's boyfriend only got 2.5 years in prison. The middle child was adopted by another family. She is doing okay. The youngest was adopted by yet another family. My family was contacted by CPS and we fostered him for a while, but we couldn't adopt. His older brother was 3 to 4 years old and already showing signs of needing full-time care forever. So my mom knew she couldn't handle another child that might need just as much care. My mom did manage to convince the birth mom to get her tubes tied after the third baby during the C-section. If she hadn't, I wonder how many more drug-affected babies this woman would have had just for other people to care for. My brother's 25 years old next month. My mom still takes care of him. She will for the rest of her life. And we already know which sister is going to take care of him after that. I offered, but my mom wants him to go to the sister who doesn't have children of her own. Story 6. Had a patient in a group ask for advice because she was feeling pressured into stuff she really didn't want to have. A friend had traveled 2 hours to see her and gotten a hotel room for them. The group heard her out, asked questions, and the consensus was something to the effect of, "Yeah, you probably owe it to him." It remains one of the only times I've dropped any effort at experiential or Socratic questioning and just flatly told people absolutely not. Reply 1. As someone who spent years married to a coercive man, thank you. No one owes anyone love, and the damage of doing it, despite not wanting to, is deep and lasting. I have visceral reactions when I am touched. My new partner is patient and understanding, but also wants to murder my ex. My ex broke part of me. Story 7. I work as a mental health counselor. I'm licensed as a marriage and family therapist. At a middle school, ages 11-14. I never judge any of the kids' actions, but some of these parents, though. I have had kids literally tell me they're suicidal, and then I have to call their parent, who is effectively annoyed that they have to take their kid to get assessed. I also had a kid in the past whose parents were about to move across the country for some woman they met on the internet and knew for 2 months. Some scary stuff. Reply 1. When I was in college, one of my younger sisters was suicidal. I had no idea until about a year ago any of this happened. She texted a friend, "Bye for good," and the friend said, "Nope, I'm telling my dad." The dad calls my parents. Cue my narcissistic, emotionally immature mother. She sits next to my sister and starts singing Firework by Katy Perry. And that's it. That's the conversation my mother had with my sister after finding out she wanted to yeet herself out of existence. Mom never took her to therapy even when my sister asked, saying, "You have nothing to go to therapy for." Eventually, my sister wrote a note saying how badly she needed help because talking wasn't getting anywhere. And I think my mom eventually, begrudgingly, took my sister to get help. Reply 2. The Michigan school murderer whose parents were both convicted of involuntary manslaughter did the same thing. Kid had asked for help, and school had told them to get the kid help up to and including the day he murdered 4 schoolmates. They also had an unsecured firearm. First time a school murderer's parents had been held to account for facilitating their children's crimes, and I hope not the last. Reply 3. Oh, moving across the country was my estranged sister. Left 2 kids and a husband for an online dude, had opened credit cards to send to him to the tune of $20K. Husband found out after a process server showed up to serve court papers on the dead. So right in the middle of COVID, she hopped on a plane and never came back. It gets worse though. A few months after she got there, all their electronics got confiscated by the feds. Turns out the man is a PDF file, convicted and serving 7 years. I no longer speak to her. My only biological sibling died to me when I found out about that crap SMH. My niece and nephew are doing pretty well regardless, but my niece cannot be around her mother alone because she's a minor. I'll never ever understand what happened to her. Story 8. I had a client admit that they knowingly infected someone with HIV because they themselves were miserable and dealing with active drug addiction at the time, and they wanted someone else to be as unhappy as they were. Story 9. I had a preteen client whose guardian kept requesting progress notes to see how they've been doing. It's against clinic policy for clients and parents or guardians to have access to the notes. They're allowed to have access to everything else, though. The client was very defiant to everyone, but was a wonderful kid throughout their treatment with me. When I met both with the guardian and parent, who both insisted on knowing everything about the kid, everything started making sense. Once the parent requested to switch therapists only because I declined their request to the notes, I knew how unhealthy the family dynamics were. I felt bad for the kid because they were opening up more about the family dynamics and how they impacted them. We had a good therapeutic relationship. Reply 1. Reminds me of when my parents made me switch therapists. They brought her my diary and were expecting her to read it and reprimand me. She saw my face, then looked at my parents and said, "I'm not going to read that because it's an invasion of her privacy." That was the last time I saw her. I'll never forget it. I never had someone defend me before. It felt amazing. Reply 2. There was a brief time when a limited amount of family therapy sessions were included in my dad's insurance. My mom used them to complain about what my sister and I weren't doing enough around the house. My sister was a model child. Did all her chores, got good grades, and always did what mom asked, but for some reason, that wasn't enough. I also got good grades but didn't always do my chores, and that made me a troubled child. I filled out an evaluation form, but I got the feeling it would be a bigger hassle to show I had depression. So I marked it in a way that made it seem like I didn't. I also kept my mouth shut during therapy sessions so I wouldn't have to deal with my mom lashing out at home afterwards. Anyway, it's been a long time since then, and I'm doing well. It just sucks to not be an adult without any power over your own life. Story 10. Used to work in an acute child psych ward. Saw a lot of angry preteen or elementary, think 8 to 12 mostly boys. And most often than not, parents treated the kid really harshly, and were shocked this only made the kid worse. Also worked in an area where they did not want to hear their old school. Parenting could be a problem. Had one dad who said, "Well, yeah, I will spank him, 11 son. When he gets angry, look, I know everyone nowadays doesn't like that, but I was spanked my whole life and I turned out fine." It took my entire ability to bite my tongue and not to say, "Sir, you just got out of prison 3 months ago after serving 5 years for a violent felony." Story 11. Not a therapist, but was a social worker. I worked with adults with developmental disabilities. ID now. A mother of one of my clients asked, "Why do I bother involving her son in activities?" Her son was dropped on the state's doorstep at the age of 3. Her son was 43 when he was my client. He delighted in and responded quite well to joining activities. It was another soul-crushing moment in the field. So many days of driving home crying and borderline alcoholism to numb the pain ended my almost 8 years in that field of work. Reply 1. Honestly, thank you so much for the work you did. My 6-year-old has an intellectual disability, ASD, pica, is incontinent and nonverbal. He is also crazy strong and full of energy. My 3-year-old is similar. He just doesn't have the intellectual disability and is verbal. I panic so much that I can't breathe when I think of where they would go or who would care for them if anything had to happen to me or his dad. Even one of my children is too much for any of our family members, so I'd imagine it would be someone like yourself that would work with them. Reply 2. I did in-home behavioral therapy with kids, primarily autism. And a father told me they adopted their son's younger sister. I worked with the son. He was about 2 years older than his sister, so that she could take care of him when she was old enough. It broke my heart to hear that was their expectation of her already. It was common to see homes completely centered around the needs, schedule, or routine of the child with a disability, and often in a way that disregarded the other siblings to a certain extent. But having it stated so clearly that she was adopted for that reason was so sad. Story 12. Started my first year practicum at the county behavioral health, working with foster kids. Shadowed my coworker for a session with a 10-year-old. On the drive back to the office, she told me that the 10-year-old was a victim of repeat CSA and has formed a great bond with her caregivers and wants to stay with them. However, her CPS social worker was actively trying to get her back with her mom, who was still living with her boyfriend, who assaulted the client. Her therapist continued to advocate for the client to stay with the caregivers, because that's what the client wanted as well. I just cannot believe that CSA isn't an immediate nope, not getting your kids back if that person is still in contact, or lives with the perpetrator, or is the perpetrator. Reply 1. Up until recently, I worked in child safety. There is an obsession with family unification that's been going on for about 25 years now. It's absolutely deranged and has done so much damage to kids. It all happened because we figured out it was cheaper to try to support families and keep them together than put kids into foster care. We underfunded foster care and also underfunded the resources it would take to support families and get kids out of really bad situations as a result. I used to be part of a team responsible for preserving families whenever possible. But the truth is that by the time they got to us, most of the time they needed to be apart, so we didn't often recommend it. Story 13. Nothing shocks me after 30 years in the field, so I never think, holy crap. However, the most depressing thing I come across from time to time is the female patient who submits to an abusive relationship in the kink community. Reply 1, that's what happened to me. I was trapped in an M or S, master or slave, dynamic for 5 years, and it destroyed my sense of individual self, my self-worth, and trust in people. I still flinch sometimes, and I'm still working on not apologizing so much. I wasn't allowed to speak my mind, wear clothes I picked out, be excited for things that made me happy, and was treated like if I didn't do XYZ, I was a bad slave and not worthy of being talked to, given respect and control over my body. He was an abuser that used kink as his cover for his treatment. It took a lot of therapy, a hospital psych ward stay, and moving away to find who I am again. Thanks to kink-friendly or kink-aware therapists who gave me a safe space to talk and begin healing. Story 14. I evaluated a child and had to testify in family court. During the court session, I learned that the mother had rented her oldest daughter to her friends when the daughter was 15-17. The mother told the daughter she had to do it, otherwise her siblings would be homeless and hungry. Mother used most of the money for drugs. Father pays rent and brings groceries every week because he knew mother didn't have money. Custody was 50-50 when this was happening. The judge did not terminate the mother's parental rights, and mother got supervised weekend visits. The judge said it wasn't clear the mother's intention was for her friends to assault the daughter, so she wasn't going to terminate the mother's parental rights. She went on about the importance of children having a mother in their lives. Till this day, I judge both the mother and the judge. Story 15. As an intern, I had a couple where the woman was chastising the man because his mother is in an abusive cult that tortures children, Mormon. The guy had excommunicated and doesn't interact with his parents and hasn't for years. She thought this is a good reason to not let him parent his children, like he's not allowed to go out on his own with them because his parents are Mormon. She says she's worried that he will let his mother kidnap her kids and was asking me for support for her beliefs. She was also just calling him names. It was weird. The whole time he's like, I don't even talk to my parents and I love my kids. In the end, she said, I guess I'm just a bitch, aren't I? Looking at me as if to get my reaction, and I accidentally blurted out, your words, not mine. Whoops! Story 16. I had this client tell me they were afraid to move forward in their relationship because they thought their partner might become a secret vampire. They were worried that one day their partner would literally start sucking blood. It took everything in me not to burst out laughing. The things people come up with when they're feeling stressed. I totally get it. Anxiety can make your brain go wild. I helped them sort through it, and they ended up realizing they were just projecting fears from an old horror movie. Still, that was one of those did I just hear that right moment for me. Story 17. A woman will call Joe who regularly complained of her relationship with her daughter. Her daughter had been taken from her when she was a child, approx 8 years, because Joe wasn't able to parent properly. Joe's driving ambition in life was to get custody of her daughter back, but everyone, including her daughter, were conspiring to prevent that from happening. It turns out Joe's daughter was 21. You can't get custody of a 21-year-old, but Joe's fixation is what had driven her daughter away. Imagine stalking your own child trying to get custody of them when they're an adult. Because her daughter was 21, I didn't have to worry about any duty to warn statutes, which is good, because that one would have been murky as hell. Reply 1. Yeah, I moved away from my abusive mother at 21, and she reported me to the police as a missing child. I'm not entirely sure how, because surely they'd ask for an age, but the cop I dealt with was shocked when I turned up, and I know she had told him I was living with her and just vanished overnight. I had to go into the station and go, "I am a grown man with a job and a rented house. I was not living with her. I did not go missing. And no, I will not just talk to her." Story 18. I'm not a therapist, but I schedule first-time therapy appointments. I had this moment a few years back when the parent of a 4-year-old child told me that they wanted to go right to medication and bypass therapy because they just didn't have the time. They also wanted to know if we would use charitable funds to pay for services in the kids' school. Typically, I would not judge a parent for this, but seeing as how the other parent's name and face were plastered everywhere around town as they were running for an unpaid political position while living in a $1 million home, I went ahead and judged the crap out of them. I am sure you can guess the party affiliation, the one that promotes family values. Story 19. I've seen and heard a lot as a therapist. However, my holy crap moments never come from what my clients say or do. It's from what their families say or do. I have had 2 clients that were victims of factitious disorder imposed on another, better known as Munchausen by proxy syndrome. Those mothers surprised me repeatedly. The lengths they would go to keep their child sick and to try to convince medical professionals that their child was sick was so extreme. The most insane part is they fully believed the delusion despite numerous professionals stating their child was not sick. Reply 1. A few older cousins of mine were victims of Munchausen by proxy. None of them talk about it much, but one of them opened up about a memory they had of their mom crushing up pills to put into her food at one point. So I guess she was not only claiming they were sick, but also doing things to make them sick. Their mom ended up going to prison when they were in elementary school. It definitely screwed them up, and all 3 struggled for a long time. They, quite understandably, all had behavioral issues growing up. Their 20s were also very tumultuous, and the 3 of them were always at odds with each other, but that seems to be less of an issue now. On a more positive note, all of them are now wonderful, caring parents with the most adorable kids. Story 20. There's enough horror in here already, so here's more of a haha what situation. Was sitting in on a psychoed eval interview during the later years of my training. The client was a high school-age male who was known to the practice already. Before getting rolling, the client asked for a tissue. Sure, normal stuff between spring allergies and all the standard reasons you'd need tissues in the course of therapy. We were plenty stocked. Trying to build some rapport as the outsider in the room, I did the how's the weather equivalent here. Oh, bad allergies? Nah, just need a parachute. Kiddo lays out the tissue on a side table, takes out his XR version of his prescribed ADHD medication, and proceeds to pop open the capsule, empty the medication onto the center of the tissue, wrap it up like a tiny old-timey bindle bag, and swallow it. My highly seasoned supervisor doesn't bat an eyelash, but I'm clearly perplexed. So the client explains to me that when he doesn't want to deal with the extended release as part of his meds, he simply removes the extension mechanism, the capsule shell, and swallows the med in a tissue parachute. Yeah, which apparently was pretty standard practice among his peers. Had never heard of it before, have never seen it referenced since. But it stood out over the copious bizarre stories about illicit drug use I heard, working with juvenile court for assessments because it was so normal seeming.
Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.